All right, I heard and saw that Theo Von interviewed Donald Trump recently. What a pair that must be. And I did see bits of it, like on TikTok or something. I didn't see a whole lot of that interview, but I thought, what an interesting interview that must be with Theo Von's style compared with Donald Trump's style. And part of it they talked about was addiction. Nothing better than that on reaction therapy than to talk mental health and addiction, especially with Donald Trump, who I heard has never drank anything in his life, never used substances, and Theo Von definitely has a history of it. So I wonder what they're going to talk about. Let's dive in without further ado. Okay, Theo Von, Donald Trump, talk about addiction and sobriety.
Yeah. I noticed at the events you don't drink, and you don't drink or smoke, right?
I don't drink or smoke. No.
You never have.
No, I never have. I had a great brother who taught me a lesson. Don't drink. And he said, don't smoke. He smoked and he drank, and he was a great guy. He was a
Isn't that somehow he says that? He was a great guy. He looked up to his brother. And that's what we need in life. I've said a long time, I don't know who originated this quote, but we live with it to this day in my household. The best way to learn is through other people's mistakes. The best way to learn is through other people's mistakes, meaning I've already done this. I can tell you where it's going to end up, especially in a family of addiction. If there is a generational pattern of people who have used and people who have gotten into trouble with it, there are some people in some families, doesn't bother them a bit. No addiction whatsoever. There are families, though, that have traces of it that go throughout. And I'm telling you, it doesn't mean you are likely to become an addict. What it means, if you start using, you're more likely than anyone else who's in a non-addictive home to start using and keep using and become an addict. So interesting that he heard from his brother, looked up to him, said a great guy, drank and smoked, and Donald never did.
He said, don't smoke. He smoked and he drank, and he was a great guy. He was a very handsome guy.
Is he older? He was older?
Quite a bit older, yeah. And he had a problem with alcohol and smoke a lot. But, I tell people, no drugs, no drinking, no cigarettes.
Yeah.
I tell that to my kids all the time. I'd say, no drugs, no drinking, no smoke. And
it was tough.
He'd always tell me, he'd say, never. So he was, really old enough that you would look up to somebody, and I'd look up to him anyway.
Did you admire him?
Yeah, I admired so much about him. He had so much going. He had the look. He
what was his name?
Unbelievable personality, like an incredible personality.
What was his name, Donald?
His name was Fred Trump. And he had a problem with alcohol. He got addicted to it because they say alcohol is tougher than drugs to get off of. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
I'm in recovery, actually. I've been in recovery, so like most of the last 10 years.
From alcohol?
From drugs and alcohol.
So which is worse?
For me, drugs is the problem, but if I have a drink, then it's tougher for me to prevent myself.
That's the whole gateway situation, So often drinking is a gateway to using harder substances, using cocaine and other things. And so you have to look at what a gateway substance would be. It's different things for different people. But when you get something that is a lead-in, that's an appetizer to the full meal, that it will get you started. In other words, drinking gets me to a point where I say, what the heck, let's go use some of this. That's when you have to stay away from both. Because if you can stay away from the drinking, he has a better chance of not using, is what he's saying here. So the drugs brought him down harder, but the drinking brought him to the drugs. Please understand that from a mental health perspective, that life is a series of choices over time we talk about. And when you make one choice, it leads to another. And we have to know ahead of time. When I go to this place, this party, this restaurant, this event, this group of people, I have to know what I will do and what I won't do. I can't be susceptible to my moods and emotions in the moment, because that impulse will take over, and that dopamine hit that starts triggering in the brain that we want to fix, and you're fiending for it, is too hard to fight off once you're already disempowered there.
For me, drugs is the problem, but if I have a drink, then it's tougher for me to prevent myself from getting it.
It sets off a chain.
Yeah.
But which is harder to quit? I've heard alcohol is harder to quit than drugs, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can only imagine because it's probably more readily available.
More readily, well, and it's social, and you're sitting and everyone's drinking and all.
Yeah,
'Cause
rarely do
nowadays
you go to a
everyone's taking
dinner and
drugs.
everybody's
I don't know how
eating,
Donald's
like,
done it all this time.
Xanaxes or
Everybody's
something,
around.
for appetizers. Usually people are having like a mint julep or something a little fancier, Negroni. I just learned about.
Right.
But yeah,
So you have a problem with that then?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I've had, it's been in my family. My family, it's like,
Generational.
yeah.
Can
it's
you
tough.
can you stay away from it?
Yeah, I've done a good job. I mean,
So how long have you been off?
I go to recovery meetings. I've been off most recently a little over 2 years.
Do you ever go back on?
Yeah, I've had stints where I go back on
And you don't control it?
it's tough. It goes down.
That's the hard part. I think Theo's explaining the challenge with recovery. You know, the statistic I read was that 7% recovery, 7% success rate in AA and 12-step programs, specifically AA because it's the most attended. But 93% of people can't go in and just stop. I mean, there is a revolving door, and it's very difficult. And he's mentioning what's real is that people stop using, get some recovery, and then they go back to using. And many times it's because caught off guard under the right circumstances. And it's very difficult. You know, it's this climb, right, with addiction. Every day you stop using, if you're an addict, is a day you're more likely to use again. I want you to understand that. You go into 12-step program, you get recovery. Every day you go in, day 2, day 3, day 5, day 10, you're more likely to use than the day before because you've stopped. You're not less likely to use then. You are going off of it. Withdrawal symptoms kick in, memories kick in, triggers kick in, real life problems kick in. So you're more likely until it crescendos. And for some people, it can be a few months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, even longer. But eventually that crescendo happens and it curves. And every day that goes by, you're less likely to use. The more recovery you get over time, the less likely you are to use. But you have to understand when you first stop using, you're more likely to go back to using because you do not have enough recovery under your belt. You do not have enough abstinence under your belt, and you do not have enough life understanding to cope with real life problems. And he's mentioning it off and on for the last 10 years. In the last 2 years is the most recent stint, I think, of recovery for him, which is awesome. The question is, like Donald's saying, is it hard to manage it? Well, if you're an addict, you can't manage it. Once you're a pickle, you can't go back and be a cucumber. Remember that, as they say in the program. You start out a cucumber. If you cook a cucumber and it becomes a pickle, which is what it does, you can't go back and make it a cucumber anymore. You are an addict, which means you cannot go back and use at all. And I think that's what he's talking to Theo about.
That's where I go back on
And you don't control it?
it's tough. It goes downhill
No
pretty
kidding.
quick.
So
You think it's going to be
you
easy.
think you're controlling it.
As
And
if
then
you
you're
never
then,
stop.
you're
That's
doing
tough.
your go-kart and racing with hookers and stuff. It gets bad.
Just not to do it, right?
Right. So then in the end, you're like, I have to not do it. Did you see, with your brother, did you
You could tell kind of here with Theo. He doesn't want this interview to be all about him and his recovery and what he's done in life. I don't think he wants it going that direction. He's trying his best to run the meeting, but Donald's really good at asking questions and finding out about people.
could you see it or anything? Man.
I
that's
was
a bummer.
amazed because he had so much going, he had everything going. I think it happened in college at a fraternity maybe, or I don't know, somewhere along the line it happened. And all of a sudden, this is not unique. This is a very common story, unfortunately. But and then the family would see it and start to notice it. And it didn't get better. It didn't get better. I was amazed. He lived for so long in bad conditions, in terms of, I was amazed that his body could
Physically
hold out.
too,
He held
yeah.
out,
How he can last.
and he'd have bad moments, but his body was unbelievably strong that it could withstand this.
Yeah, it's a body.
You know,
Your body's just so resilient.
Yeah.
Do you remember the last time that you saw him or spent with him?
I do, and
I'm sorry to ask you about it. Is
yeah,
it all right?
no, it's the reason it's good talking about it is it might help other people. If it helps
That's
one
it.
other person, it's worth the conversation.
We talk about that stuff a lot on our podcast.
Yeah.
A lot.
That's really the key is that, be real and be honest for a minute. Not every family's perfect and there are problems. And he looked up to his brother enough. His brother was wise enough to say, Donald, don't ever do this. I'm the living example of what happens when you do this stuff. So if you don't want to turn out like me, living this way, then do it another way. And I appreciate so many people in recovery who can say, this is where I've been. And there's a lot of artists and famous people out there who have lived a horrible life and recovered from it and really are examples of, I don't know how I got out of this, but I've turned my life around, and recovery is way better than addiction in terms of active.
The person, it's worth the conversation.
We talk about that stuff a lot on our podcast.
Yeah.
A lot of our audience struggles or has struggled with alcoholism, addiction, intimacy disorders, all types of stuff. So it's like it's pretty kind of normal conversation. But
the interesting thing is, and I tell people, so I never had a cigarette, and I've never had a glass of alcohol. And my brother was incredible. He would tell me, because he knew he had a problem, and he'd say, don't ever drink, don't ever smoke. He'd always add smoking, because he did smoke a lot, which is, not very healthy. But he'd say, don't ever drink, don't ever drink. He'd tell me every time, I said, don't ever drink, because he knew he had this addiction. And I never had a glass of alcohol. Never, ever did I have a glass of alcohol because of him. And I would say that if I did drink, I could, conceivably be the type of personality that would have, like you, that would have a problem. But I never had. And the only thing I say to people is, if too late for the people that you're talking about, but if you don't drink, you don't miss it. I mean, I don't even think about alcohol.
Right, it's not a part of your world.
I don't think about cigarettes. I don't think about any of that. If you don't take drugs, or if you don't have alcohol, it's real easy not to drink it. It's when I had a friend who went to the Wharton School of Finance with me. He was a very smart guy.
Where is it, Wharton School?
That's in Philadelphia. That's at Penn.
Oh, yeah, Rocky.
Right, and it's a great school, great business school. And it's part of the University of Pennsylvania, the business school.
Oh, it's nice down there.
Yeah.
My friend's brother went there or something.
Well,
we ate near there once.
Then he was smart, because it's a great school. But this person that I met, he hated the taste of scotch. Hated it. Couldn't stand it. But he insisted on having it because he felt it was important to be able to drink. I said, no, just don't drink. He said, to be successful in business, you have to sort of interact and you have to drink. And I said, don't do it. Anyway, he became an unbelievable alcoholic, uncontrollable alcoholic.
Oh, I thought you meant like one of the best.
Yeah, and he died. He was he hated the taste of scotch.
And he
couldn't live without it.
Wow.
Literally.
Well, I think I notice a lot of, like, in the recovery rooms and stuff, it's a lot of people that they're missing something inside of them, and so they take on, like,
This is the important part, though, to remember, is that when we talk about addiction, you got to put every single person talking about it, Donald Trump included. You've got to remove any personal stigma or opinion about a person, that when you get in a 12-step room, everybody's the same. Nobody's better than anybody else. Nobody's different than anybody else. And it doesn't matter whether you're the most wealthy or famous person, most broke or unpopular person. You are welcome in that room if you're seeking sobriety and recovery. And it holds, it takes everyone down, and it doesn't discriminate. And so if we can look at addiction, and we can listen to a guy like Donald Trump, the story with his brother, and the story of him, avoiding using any of this, we have to give credit to that, because let me tell you, that's stronger than most people are, in terms of, I've just never done it because I was told it was bad for me. And I've learned through watching other people, it would be bad for me. And I would probably be a pretty bad alcoholic. And he's seen people go down and destroy their lives because of it. That is a lesson for all young people in this world. You do not have to start using. You don't have to. I know it's hard. I know there's a lot of pressure. And there is no benefit to being an addict. You can talk to any addict in any 12-step recovery room, and they'll tell you there's no great thing about being an addict. I'm glad I'm in this room. I'm glad I'm getting recovery, but it is not a badge of honor to be an addict.
A lot of people that they're missing something inside of them, and so they take on, like, so they want to try and fill it up with something else. Do you remember the last time that you spent with your brother?
I do, and he'd have periods where he'd get sick, very sick, and we thought we'd lose him or we lost him. Then he'd get better. And that happened 5 or 6 times.
Amazing.
I mean, where you thought you lost him, and then he got better. And it was amazing. I mean, he was, in a certain way, very strong in that sense. And I just tell people, it's so tragic. Don't drink. Just don't drink.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have a problem. Like even you, if you didn't drink, you would never, but you probably, maybe you wouldn't be successful like you are. You know, it's part of your story, right?
It's helped me a lot. Yeah.
A lot of people say I wouldn't be as famous, I wouldn't be as popular, I wouldn't be as good a salesman if I wasn't drinking or using. It's kind of it gives me my edge. It gives me I've seen comedians say I would not be as funny if I wasn't using. And some people feel like it's part of what I got. And, he's saying, if Theo, maybe if you weren't using it all ever, maybe you wouldn't be where you are. And we have to realize, if that's the case, is that worth the price? I don't think so. And I think Theo would be the same regardless of whether he was using or not. We just have to find out what that hole is. That hole is the trauma. It's it's trauma. It's generational behavior we've watched growing up from other people doing it. It can be abuse, neglect. It can be abandonment or just dismissiveness from parents. It can be influence of other people. It can be grief. It can be loss that's happened. There's so many things that can happen earlier in our life, but usually something in our life previous has triggered the set off of us using to cope, to soothe, to make ourselves feel better, so that we don't have to remember and feel what really has happened to us in our lives. And we can be in control of our lives for just a minute. And then the reality kicks in and withdrawals kick in and the shame kicks in. And we have to use to cover that up all over again. It's a vicious cycle.
Because I don't know what would happen probably. I think it's just too risky.
It is risky.
What's something that you miss about him? Or what's something that you miss about him, Fred?
Well, he was wise in a sense. I mean, think of it. He's got this problem, and it was very important for him to convey to me not to have this problem. And I couldn't have been successful if I had that problem.
Yeah.
If I had that problem, and I think maybe I'm a personality type where I could have had the problem if I drank. But if you don't drink, you're never going to have it. I mean, I don't miss when I see somebody light up a cigarette and just, they're in heaven. I don't miss that at all.
It's weird. It's so it's very Native American too.
Isn't it crazy?
Bizarre. And I think sometimes our older brothers, they kind of they take the speed bumps for us, as younger brothers, so that we don't have to. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I
my brother
think
went through a lot of stuff so that I didn't have to go through it, and then I get to see him and learn.
Is he okay now?
Yeah, he's doing great now. But that's one of the blessings I think of having an older brother.
Well, you can learn through history too, even if it's not a brother, it's by watching other people. I mean, you can see if you have a friend who's an alcoholic, or even just by reading about people, you can learn.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a brother, but in this case, it was very personal. It was a brother, and I learned not to drink, and I learned not to smoke cigarettes. Now, I don't know that I would have smoked cigarettes. I probably would have drank. I think, there's no reason not to drink. But I had a reason because he told me, just
that was it.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. That was kind of a blessing then, huh?
Yeah.
And where did you guys ever do anything fun together? Like one nice memory that you have with him?
He had a great talent for flying. He was a pilot.
Oh, sweet.
And he loved it. And
did you ever fly with him?
I did. I flew with him. He was a great pilot and very talented. Other pilots would come to his house to study with him.
Watch him fly.
And he was really talented but ultimately he had to give that because of the alcohol. He had to give that up, which was a hard thing for him to do, but he had to give that up.
So sad because so many of us lose what we love to do because of addiction. I want everybody to hear that. Addiction can tear our families apart. It can tear ourselves apart. It can tear our careers apart in the things we love to do. It doesn't care about you. Anything you're using doesn't care about you. There's so many things you can do and accomplish in life just by not using, but it takes help. It takes getting help. And I'm not hearing that his brother really got help until he was at death's door and just in terrible shape all of a sudden.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I can't believe that I got to be able to sit down with you. I'm grateful to Dana White as well for setting this up. And I just appreciate you giving me your time today, Donald Trump. Thank you so much.
And good luck with your situation.
Yes,
You're going to do it. You beat it, right? You beat it. Good luck with it.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you very much.
That's what he's about is, beating it. And I think in recovery, they'll tell you never really beat it till you die. and then you've fully recovered. But you never really beat it. You just go one day at a time. You do the best you can. You keep people close to you that matter. You keep people close to you that care. You keep people close to you that are going to be honest to you and tell you when you're kind of creeping back towards that old direction. And if Theo can be around people who don't do those things, who don't allow him to do those things, who help support him and lift him up, who get him the help he needs before he gets in bad shape, he can be off and running. But the key is, if you're in recovery, you're around people in recovery. And in the entertainment industry, it can be really hard sometimes. Remember, it's not real therapy, but it's great therapy. I mean, Donald Trump, Theo Vaughn, two people from complete different spectrums, but share a common bond in one form or another. Give me your comments. Let me know what you think about this and what other videos are out there that talk about addiction, because I love seeing these videos. See you on the next Reaction Therapy.